There it is. Okay.
Oh, a lot of bright lights.
Hollywood.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our panel, Is Hip Hop Good for Black America? My name is Sarah Lockridge-Steckel, and I'm president of the Black Students Association. It is our mission to facilitate dialogue between our community and the general Harvard community, as well as provide a forum for the open expression of political, social, and cultural views of Black students. This Black History Month, we have planned a series of events under the theme, The Silent Civil War, Addressing Internal Strife in Black America.
Nice.
As Barack Obama stands poised to potentially win the Democratic nomination, 2008 is a historic year for Americans. Even looking at the diversity at Harvard and in this room, we can see the signs of progress our country is making. Yet, even with this progress, there are very real issues in our society. Just look at the income gap between whites and minorities, the conditions of inner city schools, and the high incarceration rates that continue to impact the Black community, and the real question becomes, how far have we really come as a society? Tonight's panel is focused on hip hop, which today has a global presence. Because of this presence, it is even more important for us to ask how the words and images we see and hear daily impact our society. As an art form that we embrace, consume, and promote, how does hip hop relate to the issues currently facing the Black community? We hope these questions will elucidate the issues involved and really push you to develop answers for yourself.
Good evening. My name is Malcolm Rivers. I'm the Political Action Chair of the Black Students Association. And I'd just like to thank our panelists, our eminent moderator, and my wonderful president who was instrumental in making all of this happen. Originally, when I brought the idea to Sarah, it seemed really amorphous. We had a long list of panelists, many of whom couldn't make it tonight, but she really put in a lot of the legwork and helped us get the contact information. I'd also like to thank the ILP for hosting it and making all of this possible. So right now, I'll introduce our moderator, Brandon Terry. Brandon Terry graduated magna cum laude from Harvard College with a degree in government and a joint concentration in African American studies. He then went on to Oxford, where he received his master's degree and is now a PhD candidate at Yale. He is also a former Black Men's Forum president and one of the greatest voices on campus whose presence still looms large today. All right. Mr. Terry.
All right, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. I also want to thank the Harvard Black Students Association, particularly Sarah Lockridge-Steckel and Malcolm Rivers for putting this thing together. I'd love to thank the Institute of Politics, especially Kathy McLaughlin, Greg Wilson, Cameron Mitchell, Sean Tierney. Have a special place in my heart for the Institute of Politics. When I was a junior, they gave me enough money so that I could write my thesis and not have to get a real job. So I'm always a big fan, and I'm very happy to be here this evening. I want to also thank all the panelists for coming. It promises to be an amazing panel, and I'm really looking forward to it. And finally, I want to thank the Harvard Black Men's Forum, not for any particular reason, but just because they're near and dear to my heart as well. So, in the past decade or so, perhaps the most intriguing global popular culture phenomenon has been the entrenchment of hip-hop music and culture as dominant forces in the everyday lives of young people. What began as the cultural play of Black American, West Indian, and Puerto Rican youth in the South Bronx over 30 years ago has since exploded into a broader cultural orientation that has thrived on every inhabited continent, influenced everything from language to politics to fashion, and become a multi-billion-dollar force in global markets. At nearly every step of this journey, however, hip-hop has faced crises, some of its own making. Our contemporary moment is no different. Bill Cosby and a number of leaders from the civil rights generation have harshly criticized rappers in the hip-hop industry for stereotypical depictions of Black life and encouraging a hedonistic lifestyle of sex, conspicuous consumption, and violence that leads Black children astray and embarrasses everyone else, but especially Bill Cosby. A growing segment of feminist critics, male and female, have objected to the hip-hop industry's portrayal of Black women and what even recent Grammy Award winner Kanye West has called its deep homophobia. In the face of the recent proliferation of nooses, hate crimes, and N-word controversies, media figures like Bill O'Reilly and a host of others have cast blame on hip-hop for contributing to a poisonous atmosphere where such behavior seems acceptable or is otherwise inevitable. Even hip-hop legends such as Nas have publicly declared hip-hop to be dead, suffering from a decline in creativity and lyricism in favor of trendy Superman-based dances and product placement. For many, hip-hop even remains linked with gun crime and violence here and abroad. Against this, hip-hop's defenders and sympathizers argue that the culture represents an unparalleled chance for young people of color to speak truth to power and shed light on the miserable circumstances many are forced to survive. They point to the enormous wealth that many of hip-hop's biggest acts and executives have amassed despite their humble origins and the many charities they donate to, and ask, without hip-hop, how else could this have happened? Often they invoke deeply American values such as freedom of speech and expression and contract, and defend their right to say whatever they want as artists. Some just throw up their hands and say it's only entertainment, and any crisis comes from people's discomfort with young blacks speaking their minds in public. If violence and sex in popular culture is the problem, why not boycott Rambo or Sex and the City too? The cultural struggle between hip-hop and its discontents is a major terrain on which black politics will be played out now and in the future because it goes straight to the heart of black communities' longest-standing concerns: representation and respectability, wealth, poverty, and personal responsibility, gender roles and sexuality, and order, security, and solidarity. I'm honored to have our distinguished guest here for another important step in these conversations, and without further ado, I will introduce them. To my immediate left, we have Professor Trisha Rose, who was born in New York City, and she graduated from Yale University, where she received her degree in sociology, and then got a PhD from Brown in the field of American Studies. She is now a professor of Africana Studies at Brown University. She's most well known for her groundbreaking book on the emergence of hip-hop culture entitled Black Noise: Rap Music and Black Culture in Contemporary America. Her new book, slated for release in 2008, is The Hip-Hop Wars, which I imagine we're partially fighting today. What we talk about when we talk about hip-hop and why it matters. She explores 10 of the most crucial issues at stake in the public conversation on hip-hop, examining the rhetoric on both sides of the debate. She has been featured in Time, Essence, the New York Times, the Village Voice, and her website, if you all want to check it out, is www.trisharose.com. To Professor Rose's left, we have Reverend Eugene Rivers, who is the pastor of the local Azusa Christian Community, a Pentecostal church in Dorchester, and he's the pioneer of the 10-Point Coalition, which is a growing network of religious entities in Boston and the U.S. committed to reclaiming the inner cities and providing mentorship for young children. He grew up in Philadelphia, where he was drafted into the Somerville gang by the time he was 12, and he credits his faith for allowing him to face the gang members and break out of the gang. In 1968, he won a scholarship to attend the Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts, and in 1970, he organized street outreach ministries in a storefront church in Philadelphia. He moved to Boston in 1976 and enrolled in Harvard College. He's also the subject of a recent documentary on BET, his new series, Exalted, so that's also online if any of you want to check that out. To Reverend Rivers' left, we have Damon Dash, who is the co-founder and former CEO of Rockefeller Records. He left Rockefeller in 2004 and currently maintains a diverse portfolio of businesses, including film, fashion, boxing, and publishing. He grew up in what he once described as the best building in a bad neighborhood in Harlem, where he swept barbershop floors and sold newspapers to make men's eat meat. He won a scholarship that enabled him to attend private school, and while his mother sold clothes out of their apartment, Damon Dash watched her and learned how to hustle. She died of an asthma attack when he was just 15. In 1992, his friend Clark Kent introduced him to a young rapper from Brooklyn, who many of you know as Jay-Z, and the two hit it off, and together with their silent partner Kareem Biggs Burke, launched the monumental Rockefeller Records in 1996. And he's launched his own clothing line as CEO. He's now a CEO, and he's producing a reality show for BET, which many of you have seen, called Ultimate Hustler. So I'd like to welcome everyone here today, and thank you all for coming. Since we're here at the Institute of Politics, I imagine we'd start off with a question that goes directly to the political questions here at stake. A number of these hip-hop intellectuals have emerged, and one in particular, Bakari Katwana, has argued that hip-hop is a potential force for politics. And then now that we're in this election year where it seems as if we have the first realistic chance for a black candidate to be elected president, I think these questions are extremely pertinent. So do you guys see that, hip-hop's ability to cross racial boundaries or establish a global marketplace for black expression, increase access to capital, and talk about the conditions in the ghettos will make for the cultural foundation of a progressive political movement? Do you think it has those capabilities?
Anyone in particular?
Why don't you start?
Okay. First, thanks very much for having me here. I always love coming to forum events. They're very dynamic. I'm looking forward to hearing from you all. The question that you raise is crucial, but I am a little bit concerned about what kind of coalition and international relationships get forged. Culture can only be a subset of political action, as far as I'm concerned. You can't really base real political action on a cultural movement. On the other hand, culture can be the glue that holds various constituencies together. It can create a common language, a common sensibility. So then that raises the question, well, what is the common language of hip hop? Particularly through the commercial medium, which is where this international coalition is more likely to be forged. Not the only place, but it's an important one. What's the language? What's the language about race? What are the conceptions about poor black people? Yes, there are truths being told about the extraordinary injustice and suffering, but there are also lies being told and truths being evaded about those very conditions. So the commercial marketplace, one should always have some skepticism about its capacity to really serve as the context for political action and political engagement. So the short version is there's possibility, but great caveats. And where commercial hip hop is today, I would say we'd need to look a little bit to the left of it in order to imagine the kind of coalitions that I think would be productive.
What was the question again?
Well, just thinking about, even thinking about something like Russell Simmons' sort of hip-hop voting registration or P. Diddy's Vote or Die. Do you think that hip-hop really has any place in politics? Do you think it can serve as a foundation for any kind of political movements that would change the way this society works?
Well, hip-hop is, I think hip-hop is powerful in this way. If someone from hip-hop that's influential was to support someone, then almost everyone in hip-hop would support that individual that he's supporting. You could, I think, change the whole landscape of any election because there's so many of us. And I also think that people, the average person in hip-hop probably doesn't vote. So if someone from hip-hop can get everyone to vote and organize, then we can be just as powerful. I think there's so many people in hip-hop that have the potential to be effective, that if one person from hip-hop can lead as that example, we can follow, if you can understand what I'm saying. So in that way, I think it's a very powerful situation. When Russell did this thing with the voting, he made all of us that weren't really thinking about voting want to vote. He can gather everyone and speak about how it could be cool to vote, and in that way we kind of wanted to. There's an awareness that can be brought from hip-hop. And again, I think it's like a lot of people that don't want to do certain things and that don't will if it becomes the cool thing to do, and that's the power that hip-hop has.
I agree with that. Now, whether that makes it a movement, part of the difficulty in this discussion is that so much gets hanged on fairly heavy rhetoric. Because at the end of the day, a lot of young brothers can do a thing because they think that's hip. Now, the fact that they think that's hip don't mean it's a movement. It just may be a new fashion. Fashions can be movements, maybe. Frequently, they're not. In most cases, they're not. So one would need to come up with a more logically compelling explanation and defense of the proposition that because you got a bunch of cats who all want to wear red T-shirts or do anything for that matter, right, would constitute, in fact, a movement as opposed to a market cycle for a consumer item. And so we've got to really be clear. See, one of the great things about being young is that you can unleash a lot of rhetoric. And since no one demands that you provide evidence for the proposition, you can say anything. You can say you can walk to Mars if you got the right drug or what have you. So what we really need to do is have more of the discussion revolve around A, this is the proposition, B, this is the evidence, and C, how likely is it that the thing proposed can be realized, and
And how.
yeah, and how you do it at the end of the day.
So does that mean that hip hop is powerful for politics?
Well, maybe. That's what I said. Maybe.
Well, that's why I didn't get it. That's
Okay,
why I was trying to
no, in a word.
I didn't go to
maybe.
Harvard, I'm sorry.
No, we cool. I love you anyway.
Like what I was saying was, if there's 100,000 people that don't vote, and somebody from hip hop can come up and go, yo, you might need to vote for this individual
Right,
because this, that, and the third.
Right.
And this person that's speaking can talk to people that may not want to hear it from someone else.
Absolutely, I agree.
So a person from hip hop can be an ambassador of people that wouldn't want to listen. Like, if you're not a coal miner, it's hard to tell a person how to coal mine.
Right.
So if someone from the street can talk to everyone in the street because they'll listen to that guy because he's from the street,
Right.
and get them to maybe vote or not vote, or vote for someone and not vote for someone,
Yeah.
that's the way we can be effective in any election, because there's a lot of us that just are sleeping.
Right.
So you might not be able to wake them up
Right.
because they might not want to hear it from you. They might not
Absolutely.
feel you're from hip hop.
Absolutely.
But if a
That's
person
right.
from hip hop can kind of convey a certain message
If he's
and
not
motivate people,
Right.
if he's not sleeping,
Right.
but a lot aren't,
So
then
how-
that can affect the landscape, I think, of any
Yeah.
election. And that's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think it's possible too. I guess I'm wondering why there's been so little political language then coming out of the celebrities in hip hop who have so much resources already. They've sold enough records. It's not like they have to worry about not breaking big. I know P. Diddy also did the vote thing. I know about Russell, but Russell doesn't make records, so that's a different matter. Have there been, and I've just missed them, and they haven't been properly, publicized,
I
that,
think you did miss
that artists have really said, look, this is the local politics in Chicago, do this thing here, get involved, or this is New York, other than the Rockefeller laws, which I know there was some activism about, but what about Obama, or what about any other national election? Have I missed those endorsements? Or?
Well, let me just say this. 9 times out of 10, when someone in hip hop says something smart, nobody speaks about it.
That's
And
why I
and
asked,
that's
yeah,
the
if it was
problem.
being
Every
missed.
time we do endorse someone, no one's going to let our voice be heard. We
So
don't
can you
own
give
it.
me an example of someone who's done this endorsement so we can
Well, you-
share that knowledge with
well-
people here who might need to know?
missed it.
Yeah, I missed it.
Well, I can
would
think of
love
an
to know.
example right offhand.
Yeah,
I
good.
know a lot of you guys have been circulating this video recently with will.i.am, Common, and a whole host of other hip hop artists and sort of
Yeah,
people
the
who
Yes
are
I
in this
Can
orbit. The
video.
Yes I Can video, which is, quite frankly, an endorsement of Barack Obama.
Yeah,
and
but that's not
putting
the
this in
street that he's
context.
talking about. I would say, no, let's be
It's fine,
honest.
that's fine.
I mean, you're right, and it's interesting, but it's a multiracial coalition. The very internal rhetoric of hip hop is that there are big splits. So if the question is that there's a mass of people who are not voting, the will.i.am
I was gonna
audience
answer the
is probably
question, though.
already voting.
I was gonna
So
answer
yeah,
that
oh, good,
question.
Mr.
good.
Dash.
Okay, good.
Go ahead, Dan. Go ahead, man. Speak your mind, man.
No, I'm just going to tell you how it is. There's an artist that I'm very close with. His name is Jimmy Jones. Do y'all know who he is? I personally heard him endorse Obama a couple of different times in a couple of different ways. But he's not a guy that sold 1 million records. So he's not a guy that when he speaks, they're going to say it on Z100 at all times or say it on Hot 97. They don't speak on it. All these rappers that don't get this public acknowledgement, you wouldn't know who they are. You're not listening where they're speaking. It just doesn't get right down to you. But trust me, people do speak their minds. It's just not in maybe the ways that you can hear it because you're not there.
Well,
you're in Harvard right now.
You don't, actually, I'm not at Harvard, but you don't really know where I travel, so let's not make assumptions. Number one,
Well, the reason why I'm making that assumption,
there
I
are
was
many
still-
of websites on hip hop where people can speak their mind freely. They don't have to wait for no Hot 97 to do an endorsement.
That's not what I was saying.
SOHH,
That's not what I was
Hip
saying.
Hop 360, people can talk if they want to.
That's not what I was saying.
Well, you are saying that that is what I'm pretty sure you said, that they are not being heard,
That's
that they're
not what I
being
said.
stifled.
That what-
Well, then repeat it so we can translate, so I can hear it properly, because I'm pretty sure I heard you, but I'm sure if
Say
I'm
it
wrong,
again, man.
yeah,
Say it
please,
again.
please
Say it
repeat
again.
it.
What I was saying was, I've personally heard him endorse Obama.
Okay.
I haven't seen him on a website because he hasn't been on one in a minute.
Okay.
But where he speaks at times, you may not be there. Like, for example, I may have been in the studio with him yesterday.
Oh, you mean personal?
No, I'm just saying. And
Right.
we had this conversation. And it was a room full of people that you probably never, ever, even though I don't know you, I doubt I'd see you sitting in a room full of Bloods. I just don't see it happening too much. And there was, I'm just saying, I'm just saying. All
right, well, we don't have to claim any sets here on stage. I think we're good.
No disrespect.
See, what that's
I just don't think we're doing that. You know what I'm saying?
This is something hip-hop's very good at, which is distracting from the issue, which is cats are not endorsing cats in public because they choose not to, because it reduces their credibility. And all this who I'm in the studio with or not with and what Bloods I know and don't know has nothing to do with the question. So Damon, tell us, is there really a political statement being made by hip-hop moguls and rich artists who have the access to the media? Let them use it.
Let's say
Break it down. Let's speak to that endorsement.
I'm never going to sit here and try to speak over you because I don't think it's respectful. I would never do that to you. Number one. So if I'm talking and I'm trying to make a point and you start to yell and things like that, I'm just going to stop.
That's
then
good.
The point won't come out. But what I was trying to say is that publicly, certain people don't get that same venue to talk. Jimmy Jones does not get the same venue as Puff just because he hasn't sold the amount of records. And the people that get the venue, when they get it, they do talk. Russell has the venue. Russell talks. Puff has it. He does talk. You can't say he doesn't. He tried to use his celebrity and his power to get people to vote. So you can't say that just because you're not listening everywhere. I'm just saying that the venues you hear may not be the same venues people are talking because they don't have access to it. We do all these things when we get the chance. We just don't all the time have the venue. You're talking about blogs and .coms and this, that, and the third. A lot of people don't do that. They just don't. Yep. Just because you don't hear it doesn't mean it's not being said. That's all I'm saying.
Let me take a shot.
That's all I'm saying.
Let me take a shot. We can say this.
I don't know why you're getting so upset.
No, it's cool, man. It's cool. No. Listen, we can say this. Everybody can agree to this. Hip hop could do more. Whatever they done. No. Be cool now. Let me finish.
I will, but you can't say
that. No. Listen.
I thought you were speaking over people.
No.
I'm listening.
Okay. Now, we can agree to this. People can do better. Can't nobody dispute that.
We can do hip hop. Everybody can do better.
That's all I'm saying.
You can't just put that on hip hop.
No. I'm not just putting it on hip hop.
I don't see rock and roll saying so much.
Look, I'm feeling you, man. I'm on your side. No, all I'm saying.
I ain't see Pavarotti say so much.
No. But hold on. We ain't talking about Pavarotti. No. We talking about hip hop. No. Don't get off that now. No, stay on message. Now, what we're saying is this: hip hop can do more. That's all. Ain't nobody hating on nobody. Ain't nobody saying they ain't doing this, that, or the other. Ain't nobody raising their voice. Hold up. So all that could be said, which is entirely reasonable, is that there can be an intelligent, rational discussion, even by people who didn't go to Harvard, around how hip hop can do more to advance the political interests of black people. No one can logically, rationally, coherently argue against that proposition, player.
What I was gonna say.
Hey, come on, man. I mean, it's that basic.
Well, actually,
anyone can do better. Mm-hmm. Anyone can do better. But to sit here and publicly knock hip hop because it doesn't do what you may think it can do or not. All right, so okay.
Ain't knocking it, player.
Truth
well,
be
let's bring up another question.
No, we ain't knocking it.
But let me just say this.
Okay.
Then if that's the case, sure we could do better. But like what I was going to say, what Jimmy was speaking about was we wanted to go see Obama.
Sure, it could do better.
Of course it could do better, but anyone could do better. But everyone has their own agenda. It's not to say that it's a selfish agenda. But people do when they get the chance in the public venue, they do discuss what's on their mind and what's relevant to the community. They do that. I've seen Jimmy Jones get on 106 and Park and talk about AIDS and the things that can help because he can speak intelligently about it. You can't expect someone to speak intelligently or the way you want them to speak if they don't have the ability to. We do what we can when we can, and when the venue's provided to us, we do it. It's always happened. You can't tell me Puff didn't do that, or Jay, or me, or anyone else. You can't say that.
Okay, I just want to make a couple very quick points. One, I think hip-hop artists have the biggest venues of any black people in the modern world, and that they don't have an obligation to do anything political. I'm not suggesting they do, but artists who have enormous access to audiences, to young people, are not frozen out of a variety of venues. Maybe they don't wind up on Larry King, or they don't wind up at the level Russell does, certainly. but there are many tiers of mass media access. So
That's not true.
yeah,
I'm in
there
hip
are.
hop. I'm from hip
But
hop.
hold
I do
on,
it every day.
I thought you weren't interrupting
But
me.
I'm just saying that's not
But I
true.
thought you weren't interrupting
All right, let's
me.
say,
My bad,
let's
but
actually,
that's not true.
we're actually going to move on for
That's
a second.
not true.
Because
So-
this is
no,
a,
no, wait,
well,
wait,
this
just
is
a
a
minute.
question I
Just
want
a
to
minute.
ask about
Mama,
the.
that's
the-
not true.
So you, now,
Well, I want to ask a
what
question
happened to
about
you? I'm
this.
not going to talk over you.
I didn't. You
That
weren't saying
went
nothing.
out. That just
All
went
right,
totally
all
out the
right.
Come on
window.
now, come on.
Let's everyone set a great example for
Let's
everyone
be
in the
nice,
audience.
come
today.
on.
No,
Let's-
meaning you
let's
weren't
be
speaking.
cool.
I wasn't saying you weren't saying nothing bad. I was saying you weren't speaking when I spoke. That's what I was saying.
Now,
Let's be nice.
I actually have a question
I'm not
too
saying-
about venues, right? It sort of goes back to this sort of how are black people supposed to use public venues in order to speak out or speak for other black folks and make political change. One of the things that's most interesting to me about these recent controversies on hip hop is that a lot of the way it's pitched in the media is sort of a confrontation between the so-called civil rights generation and the so-called hip hop generation. Now, Jesse Jackson, who was here, I guess, yesterday or the day before,
it was yesterday.
and he actually is very much so in front of the camera, very much so endorsing, whoever it is he feels that he wants to endorse this cycle. This year he's endorsing Obama. He's, showing up at Terry Schiavo, showing up at Hurricane Katrina, and in a lot of ways that's turned people off. And a lot of people in hip hop say, well, this guy, for whatever reason, doesn't speak for me. And I'm just wondering, what changes are sort of coming about such that there's this big disconnect between people who have been established leadership for so long and this new sort of emergent hip-hop generation and who it is they want to listen to, the type of political messages that resonate with them, and the type of possibilities that are going to arise for new forms of leadership and new styles and modes of leadership given this new constituency.
See, there is an intergenerational impasse that exists within the black community. And you can think about it in a couple of very simple ways. I mean, it's amazing to me to think that Martin Luther King on April 3rd and 4th, it'll be the 40th anniversary of the death of King. That's a remarkable development when I think that perhaps the majority of people in this room were not alive when King died. And there's an entire generation of black people who remember that quite vividly. And so I think, and this is on the critique side of old school black leadership, intellectually, politically, theoretically, and practically completely dropped the ball. And in fact, it was the failure of high paleo-liberal integrationist politics and policy that created the ideological and cultural vacuum for the ascension of every goofy wing of hip-hop you want to talk about. And so to the extent to which there is blame to be laid, and I think in a case when you're leadership, you're to be held accountable, win, lose, or draw. And so black leadership failed 2 generations of young black people. So whatever went sideways and off the hook and got stupid and, whatever your complaint was with it, black political and intellectual leadership, their failures. And I want to outline who I mean. I'm not just talking about Jesse or Al. I would throw Cornell in. I'm gonna go the whole route. I'd go across the board. You understand? Jesse, Cornell, everybody that's sort of the Hollywood celebrity intelligentsia. There was heavy work that should have been done to create an organizational infrastructure on the ground in the hood in 1975, 1976, 1977. But the black elite, including the Ivy League, left black poor people to die. And so we are now simply reaping the whirlwind of our criminal neglect as we let 2 generations of young black people die in the ghettos, having left them for dead. That's what this is all about.
And one of the critical problems is this drive towards celebrity. And
That's
I
right,
mean, and
right.
this whole culture of celebrity has impacted black leadership, the black intelligentsia, and black cultural workers, i.e. musicians, artists, et cetera, where the drive to be, to engage in the market first often enables the success of those who haven't really worked out the kind of progressive politics that Reverend Rivers is talking about, because that really makes for sacrifice. The work you're talking about doesn't get you big honoraria, it doesn't get you a lot of trips to fancy places, it is the work that actually puts you out of certain circles. And one of the things that has made hip hop so important historically is that it emerged as a space where those stories of that kind of abandonment could be told.
That's right.
And so therefore, one of the big tragedies of commercial hip hop is that that has become a product. That the ghetto itself has become a product, not a crisis to be solved, not a circumstance that should make us respond immediately with all kinds of outrage, but instead something to be consumed, outfits to be put on. And yes, a few more get elevated, right? For their own success inside of hip hop. But the grassroots of hip hop's origins audience remain as poor as ever, with the hope that they might make it big individually, very much like the problem of the civil rights leadership generation. So we're not actually looking at hip hop making a shift in that. In some ways, what's happened to commercial hip hop in the last 10 years in particular is part of the very same problem I think you're identifying.
Absolutely.
Well, I actually have a question for Mr. Dash that goes into these kind of things. Now, you seem to have drawn a distinction, Professor Rose, between commercial hip hop and then some sort of other, whatever we want to call it, right? Conscious hip hop or underground hip hop, et cetera. But it seems like, at least to me, that a lot of rappers and companies that, back rappers, walk a fine line between illuminating the moral struggles of ghetto life, the pressures that push people towards things like selling drugs, violence, whatever, and then glorifying these decisions outright. Right. And Mr. Dash, I know that you've produced a number of albums or been involved with a number of albums that I think, any serious critic of hip hop would have to wrestle with and say that these are albums that do a great job of walking that fine line, at least some of them, and that they really wrestle with these moral quandaries. And I was just wondering, do you think, how do you negotiate these tensions? When you're producing an artist, how do you think about the messages that are put out there and making really sort of more or less thoughtful music, and then responding to a commercial marketplace and a fan base and media and all these types of things?
I think there needs to be an understanding of exactly what hip hop is. It really does. Number one, the average demographic of hip hop, whether you know it or not, is between 15 and 25. The average rapper is like 18 years old. Once he gets 30, he's old. So around 17 and 18, as you're growing up, all these responsibilities don't weigh on you as a priority. You're a child. You're growing up. I'm 37 years old. One of the reasons why I don't make hip-hop records anymore is because I don't agree with some of the things that are said by younger people. But they are younger people. They have to have that room to grow. They make those mistakes. It's not like there's a 37-year-old rapper that's saying something so stupid. It's usually a 17-year-old because they don't know, because they haven't had that experience yet. You yourself said you were in a gang when you first came up. Right. And the reason that you feel that you got through it was because you were smart enough, I guess, to listen and do one thing or another. But it all happened through time.
Right. That's right.
So I think you're putting too much responsibility on children, guys that are young that are still learning. Sometimes, like the other day, I was walking to work from my apartment, and I saw this dude, and he was about 35, and he was on the phone yelling. And I was like, he looks retarded. I was like, I hope that's not how I looked when I was arguing, because I know I used to raise my voice often. And I said, the thing that really bothered me about the picture was that if he was 17 years old or 18, he might not look so retarded to me. It just looked retarded that an older guy was doing that. So with your question that you asked, usually when I was in the business, the artist that was saying the negative things was just very young. And he needed guidance, but he did need to express himself. And he did need to learn. So I would always try to guide any artist that I had, but I always tried to sign artists that were telling the truth. And the last artist that I signed was Kanye West. And he wasn't such a gangster rapper. He was more of a nerd. And I felt that a nerd needed a voice. And honestly, I really couldn't back anything but that right now, because he wasn't putting anything out there that was negative. You understand? As you get older, you transition out, you learn. But I don't understand why you're so angry. It seems like you're so angry.
Can I take a shot?
No, I wasn't here. I was just listening.
No, he's cool. See,
I
Mr.
guess
Dash,
you need me for the act.
right.
I'm just like the foil.
Am I wrong? Is she appear angry?
No, she's
I'm
cool.
just,
She's cool, man. No, she's cool, man.
Everybody's cool.
Everybody's
I'm
cool,
not saying
man.
angry at me.
We full of
she's cool,
Fonzies.
man.
We
I
cool.
can take it.
I'm not even
I can take
angry
it.
at all.
I'm not saying angry at me. I'm saying angry at hip hop.
No, that's so presumptuous.
I know, that's why I
That's
asked.
twice you made
That's
such
why I
profound
asked. That's
Okay.
that's the energy I was receiving. So I asked about it. Like, am I missing something?
Now, I'll
Okay,
explain it when it's my turn to talk.
Now,
Just was wondering.
Mr. Dash, you're making a very important point, which is part of the critique that's being advanced by a certain group of intellectuals. I don't blame a 17-year-old kid for being a 17-year-old kid and saying things that are stupid, because that's what you're supposed to do when you're 17. You're supposed to have responsible adults to check you. More fundamentally, if you're a dude, you're supposed to have a father to pop you upside your knot when you get out of line. Now, you've got a generation of young boys, 2 generations, 3 generations of young boys that have nobody checking them for real, for real. And so I completely agree with you that people, the old folk, are wrong, completely off the wall. Why would you condemn a child that you neglected? You neglect a child for 3 generations, then you got the nerve to criticize him because you were a loser. I agree with you. The old men who were making all them babies, knocking all them women up, abandoned the women and the children. The children became monsters, you understand? And they left them in them ghettos to die. Now you want to lecture me, sucker, about what I did wrong when you abandoned me. I completely agree. Dude, we on the same page on this. See, part of the tough conversation, Brandon, has to do about lighting up black leadership because they are the ones, by depraved indifference, created the conditions. So you got 3 generations of confused kids that are somewhere between confusion and being monsters. That's what this is about. This is really not physics. This ain't that deep.
That's true.
Okay, I want to take one more comment from Professor Rose, and then we're going to open it up for questions. So if you guys line up at the microphones that are around.
Because my active listening has created a misconception, let me just lay a couple things out. I've been deeply invested in hip hop since its beginning. Of an age where I remember the beginning of hip hop. I am not in any way against hip hop. I'm very disappointed, however. I mean, actually, let me add a sentence in the middle. I've written in defense of hip hop for close to 15 years. And I will continue to support hip hop, but not around certain issues where I think many defenders of hip hop, and I'm not referring to you here at all, Honest Engine, this is my position, I've had it for years, it's not connected to you. Honest Engine, I'm just trying to keep it nice and civil. That there's a kind of hyper-defense of all things hip-hop at the heart of hip-hop, particularly in a way that allows commercialized representations of black people to stand in for the culture as a whole. And I actually think that the defenders are often as problematic as its harshest insane critics. And that we're locked between, to me, an uncritical defense of things that I think we need to challenge. So for example, misogyny is not a youth problem. It's an international, multi-generational problem. Hip hop has helped make it commercially extra valuable in the black community as a product. It's not responsible for starting it. It's not responsible for its origin, but it is an agent of its expansion and normalization, okay? That is not an age issue. Old folk are just as misogynist across the board. So the question isn't only, are these just young people, but also, is this not a culture that adults are participating in and profiting from and using young people for? But Snoop is almost as old as me, so consequently, I think there should be some generational responsibility. Why not? Well, because there's too much money involved. Misogyny, violence, ghetto street culture is a great product for middle-class white America and for the world. It completely continues a legacy of representation of black people that's 300 years old. It's an almost direct, unbroken line. Does that mean there aren't circumstances like that are legitimate? No, in the hood. Those things really do happen. I get all that. But the ways in which it gets played out do work against, in many cases, the very communities that they come from. So the commercialized value of the product of hip hop is something we should look at as a product. And we should not imagine that this is just the uninterrupted voices of individuals and that when they grow up, they'll turn it around because the market wants them to keep saying precisely this. And we keep buying those records. I say we. We keep buying those records, and therefore, we keep their stunted growth no matter how old they are. Rock and roll is youth. You started out as youth music, too. That's not the issue only. The issue is what are the political, social, and cultural ideals being shaped? And hip-hop, it seems to me, has a lot of self-reflection to do, some hard critical self-examination from a position of love, but it has to be hard because otherwise that growth is not going to happen.
But what I don't understand, what I'm not understanding is how come you're generalizing hip hop? There may be some individuals that do the wrong thing, but there's so many that do the right. With every Snoop Dogg, there's a common sense.
You think it's equal, 50-50?
For sure. I think it's more, who sells more records? Kanye West or Snoop Dogg right now?
Listen, Kanye West.
Well, who has a bigger
I thought
voice?
you were asking a
You
question.
know what I'm saying?
Sorry.
Kanye West sells more records than Snoop Dogg. Snoop Dogg hasn't broke platinum in 5-6 years. Snoop Dogg is Snoop Dogg. But what about Common Sense, Mos Def? What about all those cats? I mean,
They
you
don't-
can't
they-
just generalize hip hop. You can't just do that.
They don't sell at the same level
they-
as Jay-Z. They don't
Yes, they
sell
do.
at the
Jay-Z
same level
just
as
went
50
platinum.
Cent.
Kanye just sold 2.5. 50 Cent just only went platinum. Those guys that you're talking about that are negative don't have
so
that.
let me
Wait a
ask you-
second,
yeah.
please. Those guys that you keep saying have this voice don't sell the volume of records anymore. It almost now, the dumber you are in hip hop, the less hip hop people want to hear from you.
Yeah.
I don't know why you're saying that. That's why I'm sitting here listening to you like, what are you talking about?
Can I? Oh, just
One
one quick.
more comment, and then we're going to open it
It's
up.
the
I
truth.
just want to underscore a point that Mr. Dash has made that should be noted for the record. One of the things that is being witnessed in the last couple of years, and this is true, is that, and here again the numbers tell the story, there is a shift in the consumer market which we should not deny. If Kanye West, I mean, remember the big showdown between Kanye and what's the dude, Curtis?
50 Cent.
Yeah, Curtis Jackson, right?
Who won that one?
Right.
Who won that
no,
one?
no,
The bulletproof vest or the pen?
The whole thing, right. So one of the things that should be noted just parenthetically in the conversation, just to keep it real, is that there appears to be a shift in the consumer patterns which gets down to the money. And we should factor that in. I mean, and your point is well taken. Snoop Dogg ain't done much. Now, in fact, he's now got to go to reality TV and got his little fatherhood thing since he's not doing it in the studio.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to disrespect Snoop, but all I'm saying is the more powerful voice in hip-hop seems to be the smarter voice these days.
Fair enough.
That's all I'm
Touché.
saying. So now I'm wondering, and this is why I'm asking you, why are you bringing up guys that were rolling 10 years ago? The guys that are rolling now are more conscious.
You
This
think
is a
it's
whole
really
new
10
day.
years ago? I
For
mean,
sure.
So what you're telling
For
me that you think
sure.
this trend has been going on for 10 years?
I think it's trending. I can honestly tell you because I signed Kanye West that we were like, yo, we don't want to hear this gangster shit no more. You understand what I'm saying? I don't want to hear it. And I was probably at the forefront of it.
Well, good for you.
So I'm not saying me, I'm saying all of us. So you have to let people grow. I'm not saying you're not, but you have to
But
let
you're
it.
suggesting
All right,
it,
what I'm
certainly.
saying is this.
Yeah.
Touché.
When I had a record company, I was young just like everyone around me. I was a CEO. I sold 2 companies by the time I was 30. I was 25 and 24 and 23 doing all these things. So I'm still learning about myself. It's hard to teach somebody when I'm still trying to teach myself. But as I got older and saw, look, I can't be a part of this. That's why I transitioned out to do other things, as most of us. So the ones that have the voice these days are generally the smartest. I'm trying to explain something to you. The trend in hip-hop is the stupider you are, the less we want to hear from you.
Except for Soldier Boy. But I mean, I
How
guess-
many records did he
This
sell?
is a great point.
No, but
Soulja Boy's like 10 years old.
It's not just about record sales.
You got it.
Soldier Boy's, he's not even out of high school yet.
That's not the point.
I
You
just
listen
want
to
to
Soldier Boy? I hear that.
You're a comedian. You're very funny. I see why you've done so well.
Ding, ding, ding. I want to take some questions now. Remember, please, because we're running out of time, all questioners must identify themselves, 1 question per person. Please, questions, not manifestos, and questions end in a question mark. So,
Just in case.
Is this on? All right. Hi. I'm Esco Johnson. I'm a freshman here at the college. My question is for Professor Rose and for Reverend Rivers. I have a quick side story to give just before I ask my question. All right, I will skip the side story.
thank you.
All right. All right, well then, I don't need my book. What I was going to say is that for a period of time, I was a product of my environment around me. We used to live in the US, and then we had to move to Trinidad. And one of the main reasons was because I came home to my father one day, and I came from an all-white school. I looked him in the face, and I said, "Stupid blackface." And so my parents were like, "All right, we're out." I was about 2, 3 years old at the time. And my father was angry, obviously upset, but he wasn't angry at me because of what I had said, but because of the environment that I was going to day after day after day. And I just want to like bring that over to the question of hip hop then. Why is it that we have these people who are growing up in these environments where they're seeing their friends getting like stabbed and shot and killed on a day-to-day basis, and yet we're getting angry at them for what they are saying instead of for the environment that they are instead placed in? I don't think it's fair that we expect them to kind of like grow up in these same environments and then come and like rap about like uplifting positive things. That is not what they have seen. Right. And if you look at the rappers who are doing that, like Talib Kweli, Lupe Fiasco, etc., the environments are very different. Talib grew up in a very educated household, as did Lupe Fiasco.
I hate to cut you off. I think we get the question. I want to let them respond, just for the sake of time.
I think we've said it. I mean, it's already been said before that the reality, of the negative wing of the kind of pimps and hoes wing of hip hop and all of that was a product politically of political abandonment on the part of the black leadership class. So no one is blaming, and I think I should, just for myself, I don't blame my children or my grandchildren for their failures if I neglect them. Very simple point, politically. I accept responsibility for a lot of the drama that the black community has around 2 generations of young people who were left to die, and they just didn't. And then they created some stuff and said, all you old Negroes can go to hell. And I understand that. I will challenge it and resist it. And so I don't think that this discussion this evening has been about blaming young people for being young people or not having the direction that Mr. Dash referred to.
Well,
we have to take another question. You respond. No, you respond, but we have to take another question.
I mean, I think, what's interesting is that hip hop has evolved a great deal, and the same genre has an earlier generation of young people who were also living in very similar circumstances and who certainly dealt with that violence, but it wasn't a product in the way that it became in the last decade, which means that it was one of many wide-ranging sets of experiences in the music and culture. And I would argue that as hip-hop got more and more successful as a product in the late 1990s, especially into the early 2000s, it became narrower and narrower in terms of its representation. So while I agree with the generational arguments that Reverend Rivers is making, I think these are not just about children expressing themselves. This is, to me, a highly romantic idea that completely erases the global capitalist context for the production of hip-hop as a product. And that means that, no, you don't blame individuals, but you do say, look, what is your take on this experience? You experience this every day? Well, what is your take on it? Not just tell me all about it for voyeuristic celebration, but let's really grapple with this suffering really seriously if that's going to be the excuse for its existence. So then that becomes, to me, I think, a legitimate set of questions to ask about it. And there's nothing about being hostile to young people at stake, but it is about saying that if you're going to profit from, and there's a lot of people making millions and millions of dollars off of this, record companies, executives, what are you talking about?
I'm a record company and I'm an executive. There ain't no money there no
Nobody's
more.
So you have a very, very rightfully, and I think you're right, you have a very short sense of history. I'm not talking about 2 or 3 years. Let me just make sure you understand my point. I'm talking about over the last 15 or 20 years, a substantial amount of money, tell me if you disagree with this, has been made in one form or another, in marketing, products, offshoot products, and the music itself through hip hop. Is that a fair statement or a total misstatement?
A fair statement to say is whoever has been put on that level, usually they're not allowed to curse or do anything. The ones that the masses were saw people get to kind of exploit are the ones that aren't really from the street. The guys from the street never got to make that big cake because you can't curse and do a Coke commercial. You can't carry a gun or bulletproof vest and sit in front of a car. So the ones that do get the light of day are usually the ones that are talking the most watered down ones. It's Will Smith and them. Those are the ones that got the money.
So you would say someone like Ludacris or Jay-Z wouldn't count there?
Ludacris never talks about gangster stuff. He just raps fast. What are you talking about?
No, wait, that's not true. I'm not just talking about gangster stuff. Wait, you're not
That is true. Ludacris was a DJ in Atlanta, and Shaka was a program director.
No, I'm talking about valorizing and glorifying both
Jay-Z never glorified it. I'm telling you, ask me a question, I'm going to answer. You asked me about Jay-Z and Ludacris.
Yeah, but
Jay-Z,
and I disagree with you.
You're wrong. I made the records. I was in the studio when they were made.
You're,
All
you're,
right, well,
that's
Jay-Z
great, but
used
that
to
has
rap
nothing to
about-
do with the content of it.
Jay-Z
That, just because you were there doesn't mean you know how to analyze
well,
the content,
if I can speak,
bro.
maybe you can understand it. I'm trying to tell you. Jay-Z used to rap about the repercussions
Oh, my
of the
goodness.
things he did and how he wanted to transition out. Listen to it. You're not listening to it.
Yeah, I'm not listening to it.
You're
You're
not
right.
listening to it.
Okay.
Okay, well, we're going to listen to this question from up here in the balcony.
I'll give you my number, man.
All right, my name is Jarrell Lee. I'm a sophomore at the college. And well, basically, it seems to be a disconnect between you two. And you guys
Really?
definitely support two different sides of the bridge. Now, I'm wondering what could be done to sort of bridge these two sides and resolve this issue and move forward and actually do something with the power that hip hop has.
Well,
Take Mr.
let me just
Dash
say
first.
this. My issue is I think she misunderstands hip hop. And even what my issue was with Bill Cosby would be like, yo, how you going to chastise your children in front of the rest of the world? I never understood that. If you feel that we doing something wrong, you don't tell the other guys what we doing. You pull us to the side and teach us how not to do it. Why would we listen to you?
If it's not happening in the media.
Just trying to finish talking.
Yeah, well, you know.
And despite what she's saying, I do believe that hip hop is playing its part. It's just people don't want to recognize it for some strange reason. And it bugs me out how people that aren't in it every single day tend to have the most to say about it. I could not sit here and speak about your profession or whatever you do every day and tell you the ins and outs of it because I'm not there. All I'm speaking about is what I've seen, what I did, what I've said. I'm talking on fact. I'm not speaking about my heart and I'm saying what I actually saw. I can tell you exactly what these people were thinking when they said it and what they did and the obstacles we came across. Like when he said these venues aren't presented to us the same way. If you don't kiss and do some sort of little tap dance, they don't give you the venue. Trust me, the more gangster you are, the more you get pushed out. This is what I'm saying. I don't understand that.
Can I take
And there's a
shot?
lot of positive stuff in hip hop. We do it.
Let me pick up on the bridge point. I think that there is now an opportunity for there to be a rapprochement between the intelligent elements, and the individuals that Mr. Dash is talking about, and a certain element in the black community that is willing to, at the leadership level, accept our responsibility for failing 2 generations of young black people. We abandon the poor. Fact. I don't care who you are. The wire is the truth. Doc, we abandoned the poor. That's how the thing went down. And it is wrong, in fact, to neglect people for 3 generations and come back and lecture them because they've got bad manners when you refuse to raise them. And so I think, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, and so my point is, I think there's a basis for a rapprochement to have a tough conversation. Because right now, the black community is in sort of a version of a cultural civil war. We got this intergenerational thing, and I don't want to overstate the point, but we've got this impasse. And I think that what's personally I'm actually surprised about how intelligent this conversation is, right? There's some possibilities for another level of discourse. And I think 2 things have happened, Professor and Mr. Dash. I think people in the industry and the game need to be heard to understand the insider ball of the game. Mm-hmm. I know I don't know the inside of the game. So I'm not, and Professor Rose is someone who has studied this as a scholar. So I think there needs to be some common ground for a dialogue where the insider gives us the real insider ball and how the thing went down for real.
Well, that would be the insider of what? Are you talking about the industry?
The industry.
That would be me.
Yeah,
Right,
dude.
right.
My man right here, right.
Well, no, look. I mean, I think that the industry is a major part of hip hop, but it's not all of hip hop, and I think that's one of the problems that's happened over the last 10 years. That you know things I'll never know. I'm not suggesting I know anything about the inner workings of the contracts, the studio, the friends, the networks, all of that. No doubt I will defer to that. What I do know is how to read mass media trends. There are many numbers that are published. Can you let me finish now? I've been really, you're very humorous, but this is a serious issue. And black people are really, their lives are at stake. This is not a joke. So to me, the bridge is about, I disagree with Cosby. I think the right wing has attacked hip hop inappropriately. I think black middle class leaders attack it on the wrong grounds. I think the conservative attacks against hip hop are problematic, and I would never agree with those. I think a progressive challenge to commercial hip hop is lacking, and that's the position that I want to take up to create a connectivity among many who are in hip hop who also feel like the direction of it, maybe in disagreement with Mr. Dash, but who feel that the direction of it in the commercial arena has been, for whatever reason, a sign of its demise, not a sign of its growth, creatively and socially. So that, I'm more for that.
Real quick,
Real quick,
just
and then
what
we'll
I'm,
take this
the
question.
point I'm trying to make is that they never talk about the positive things we do in hip hop. This is what I'm saying. On a commercial level, you'll never hear about a gangster doing nothing that's good. They'll just talk about gangster doing gangster things. So what I would always do, for example, I was always upset with urban fashion. And you didn't say that when you introduced me that I started rock with as well, but it's all right. I always would be like, you know, I hate the prejudice of urban fashion because number one, urban people don't really make it. We're being exploited. Right. And I felt it was important to get and disassociate myself from it to go and do real fashion and do my own line because I wasn't going to let anybody acknowledge me. I was like, you know what? If I have a problem with something, I'll do it myself and change it my way. If I'm worried about the way I'm represented in a newspaper, then I'm just going to buy a newspaper and get represented correctly. But my point is, the newspaper, the radio, and the books and everything else, that's all they're going to give us. They're going to give us the negative. They're never going to tell us about the positive. So if someone that's never been in the hood, not to say you haven't, but someone that's not there, all they're going to know is what they've read and what they see on television. And like you said, on television, they're only going to give us a reality show where we act like Flavor Flav. And that's all they're going to know. But when we do something smart, they never say anything about it. This isn't a Dame Dash commercial, but every day I read something about myself, it's always negative. And I never hear anything positive about the things I've done. I've never heard anybody talk about the fact that I'm a young entrepreneur that's made a certain kind of dollar or a guy that raised his son since he was 8 by himself. Like I've only heard about the stupid stuff that I pour champagne on a girl. I don't get it.
I've got to take this question up here.
Hi, my name is Joni Tobin. I work at Tufts University. And you were talking earlier about the generational gap created by the civil rights generation. And yeah, you did, Reverend Rivers. And I was wondering if each of you could address this. Who specifically is going to take the lead in the hip hop generation to bridge that gap and break out of the vacuum that was created? Because we can talk in generalities, which we have been doing, but who is going to come to the front and take that opportunity to really make a statement? Because the hip hop generation is maturing, like you said, and soon they're going to be retirees just like the civil rights generation. And I think it hasn't really been addressed. Who
I
is
think
actually
that's
gonna...
happening right now. This conversation is part of that. The young people in this room that are engaging in this discussion is part of how that gets addressed. It's taken a long time just for anybody to cop to the fact that black leadership failed 2 generations, then we blame our kids for our crime. No, I think this is happening now. I mean, I think there have to be a lot of conversations. I think there's got to be a lot more intelligent listening to people in the industry. Not to justify it or to sanction it, but just to understand the game. I mean, the industry is now tanking, I'm told, right? The industry is tanking. That's going to produce a new political and commercial reality. The responsible adults who have half a brain should be listening carefully to what's going on in the industry. They should be listening to young people. And listening to young people don't mean you agree with every stupid thing they say. Some things they say will be hip and some stuff will be stupid. And if you an adult with some brains, you'll know the difference between the two. But we have to have that dialogue. What's happening here, I think, is a major breakthrough, just in terms of this kind of intergenerational conversation and coming with, on the part of the adults, humility to listen and learn. For real, for real.
Professor
Do you
Rose.
all have any comments?
I really wanted to make sure we got other people. I think in terms of the hip hop generation, which is a term I do challenge a little bit, because the civil rights was a movement, as Reverend Rivers was saying earlier, an actual political grassroots movement where a lot was really at stake. Hip hop it doesn't function that way. It's a cultural form. It's the only, for example, generation of black people that have ever historically seen themselves as part of a music and cultural form, as their identity. No one says they're in the jazz generation or the R&B generation. So it's kind of an interesting question, but as such, I'm concerned about that that as a primary identity for an entire generation, given its separation from, they're not parallel, civil rights versus hip hop. And I'm actually not in the civil rights generation, technically speaking. And so that's why I don't really see that. And I think you're right, there will be greater bridges, but they have to be two directional. We can't have, the kind of Cosby attacks, but we also can't have a kind of what I tend to see as a kind of disingenuousness about the corporate market context and the power that's really at stake. There's a kind of playing both sides against the middle. I don't have any power, I'm manipulated, but then I also use the very power I have to keep making more resources. Like, both sides have to really do some soul searching, both about what they don't know, but also to be more honest about what they do.
Okay, we're going to take this one last question right here.
So first off, I went to a program in high school that was sponsored by one of Mr. Dash's organizations, and I'm sure many other African-American students went to the LEAD program as well. And you also sponsored a concert at the Apollo Theater in Harlem, which you were there too, so I just want to thank you for that.
I went to that.
And my point is that, I was there as well. There's definitely been a fundamental disconnect between the way scholars think hip-hop touches the streets. Hip-hop doesn't touch the streets through a video or commercial album. It touches the streets through, in my opinion, mixtapes. Most urban black males don't read the New York Times, but you can definitely get an insight on what's going on if you get, whatever your favorite rapper or philosopher's mixtape is. And you'd be surprised how active a lot of these musicians or a lot of these rappers are in promoting a lot of images like Barack Obama. You talked about Jimmy. One thing Joel said was, young Barack Obama, I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Exactly. He said,
Thank you.
I'm like a black Republican. Now I can't call it better yet a Democrat running him out of office. And
Your question?
my question is that why are a lot of people in an older generation so quick to indict hip hop when they're not organically involved in listening to the messages that is promoted on mixtapes through hip hop clothing? If you go to a hip hop clothing store, you'll see Barack Obama tees all over the place, more Barack Obama tees than Stop Stitching tees. And we're so quick to indict what we're not doing, but most of these people here are not organically involved in true hip hop.
As
Thank
the
you.
official old person, let me go to that.
Right.
I'm the official old dude, right? Well, I answered your question probably 3 times already this evening. If you caught it. Now this is real simple, son. I said that the older generation had dropped the ball on this whole thing. This ain't physics. You got old people disconnected. They don't get it. They don't listen or learn. 40 years pass by. They're out the loop. This ain't physics, man. Old folk disconnected from something that they now don't understand. They're scared and intimidated by it. You understand? This ain't deep, man. They don't get it. It ain't difficult to understand why they don't get it. They're 40 years disconnected. When you're disconnected from anything for 40 years, you ain't with it. Is that hard to get?
I get it.
Okay. This is simple, man.
I think that is one lens. And I actually think the philanthropy of a lot of hip hop artists does really go under the radar unfairly. And I think not only his program, but many other types of programs have done enormous work. And so I think there has been a profound return of resources, energy, time, and it's often targeted in exactly the right way because people understand those circumstances. No question about that there's a manipulation of what we hear and see. At the same time, I feel I'm a little tugged because, I hear your passionate defense, but what I'm surprised is that the public conversation makes a loving but hard critique impossible. It's either you're hating on hip hop or you're embracing everything in it, and there's a lot. I think if you and I were to sit down and we really had a conversation, a lot of the things I would say, I don't think you would disagree with. But when we get into a public setting and there are challenges made to a ubiquitous language of hip hop does good also, it's not just bad, we lose sight of the fact that, well, if the resources that a lot of artists, I'm not speaking about you at all, I swear, this is just my general point, of resources that a lot of people make is made using and basically perpetuating particularly representations of black women in ways that are really destructive to black relationships, then that's kind of a little bit like blood money. Not entirely, but a little bit. So I'm concerned about that, right? I want to know where the money, in a sense, is culturally coming from. I don't just want to say, well, I'm only glad that you got that program. I want to try to fight for more creative space so that it isn't a give and a take, but in fact that we only get to give and not have to lose something at the same time.
Okay, we have one final question. Please identify yourself. A real question.
My name is Kristen Jones. I'm a senior here at Harvard. Professor Rose, you mentioned progressive challenge to the commercial hip hop movement. And Mr. Dash, I think when you said, I signed Kanye West, to me, that was kind of saying, like, I wanted a progressive change. I was looking for a change to commercial hip hop. And so I guess my question is, you're now saying, I walked away from signing artists, from producing artists, because there weren't enough people like Kanye, and I guess I'm wondering, why not keep continuing that search? Seeing Kanye's success, seeing that a lot of people crave that sort of artist, people who are, being intelligent, are saying things that we can identify with, why walk away? Why not, move in the
I'm
what she was
explain
talking
it to you
about?
so you can understand. When I signed Kanye West, I was told not to sign Kanye West. Leor Cohen said, don't pay attention to Kanye West. Jay-Z said, don't sign Kanye West. I knew it was right, but I was in a room filled with people that told me it was wrong. It's a hard fight. It's a hard fight. It's hard to sound arrogant and cocky, but to walk in and know that you're dead right and everyone else is dead wrong. And I got to fight them every single day. And I'm not making any money for it. So what I felt, I can do more outside of hip hop to help empower these kind of people, because the money's not in the record sale. If the record, honestly, like the record now, the record business is about, you build your brand off that. The things around it is sort of where you make your money. So I felt like if I can establish myself outside of the urban marketplace and become more powerful than those non-urban people that were trying to stop me from showing everyone how smart black people can be, then I'd have more control, which I now do. So I'm sitting here in a suit that I made myself. So now I can go to a Leor Cohen and say, look, just because you got a suit on doesn't mean that you could tell me what to do, because my suit looks better than yours. You understand what I'm saying? So that's the reason why I got out the music business. People are retarded. And the people that are the most retarded are the ones that benefit from it the most, not the rappers. It's the people outside the culture that are exploiting the rappers and leading them toward, like, all the beefs that happen in hip-hop could easily get squashed. Jimmy Iovine could have easily told 50 Cent, no beefing with Irv Gotti. Instead, Jimmy Iovine tells Irv Gotti, I can't even be in the Irv Gotti business. I can't even speak to you as long as I'm in the 50 Cent business. He doesn't care if anybody gets killed. He's just going to stand on the side with who's making him the most money. And that's what I've seen happen. These are the difficulties we have. The powers that be, we don't run, like, I ran my record company, but you saw how they used to do me publicly. I had to fight every single day to make sure that my artists were properly, or were doing the right thing and looked at the right way. They were constantly trying to push my artists in the wrong direction. And when an artist has nothing else to fall back on, he just does what he's told. He's scared because he doesn't have the wherewithal to do anything but that. He feels lucky to be there. So he's not fighting. I used to fight. I was just sick of fighting. Quality of living means something as well. So it was a lot of different reasons why. I can help Kanye West more now than I could before, because I could put him in the right places, and I could put other people in the right places as well, because I've established myself outside the urban marketplace. You understand what I'm saying? That's why.
Okay, we actually got the green light to take this one last question, so.
Thank you so much. My question is actually lodged in response to a criticism about black leaders, including Cornel West, who I don't think have been justly represented. Specifically, I'd like to know from you all why you think it is Larry Summers, the former president of Harvard University, gave Cornel West so much shit for producing a hip-hop album here at Harvard. Cornel West, if you're hearing this, we want you back.
Well, two things. I mean, one, I think, Cornel is an extraordinary intellect and an activist from his sphere, not an activist as in a grassroots activist, but he uses his sphere to agitate and try to not only change the way people think, but also to try to network and transform certain contentious dynamics in various arenas. So I have enormous, the argument about Cornell being in that group was his, it wasn't mine. No, I just want to, no, you should. I'm just clarifying, because sometimes we all like jumble together. Although I don't think people have confused myself and Mr. Dash tonight, but you know, I can see how people might have confused who said that. But in terms of the hip hop record, first of all, that's not really a hip hop record, as far as I'm concerned. Actually, we might agree on this, so that would be nice. But it is a spoken word speech type record, and there is enormous disrespect for creative energies that come from poor black people until the next generation legitimates it. So jazz was despised, the blues was despised. There's not a single black, working class cultural form that's emerged since during, the beginning of slavery to now that was not completely dismissed, despised, disgraced by institutions of legitimation. Harvard is the quintessential legitimation institution. So for one of its black intellectuals to try to anoint status and value by associating with it was definitely grounds for additional censure. It wasn't the only, but it certainly added. So there's a lot of pressure among black intellectuals and the same general leadership that you're talking about to have a hands-off approach. And there's a lot of people who want to try to challenge that, but they don't necessarily get that top billing. Now, Michael Dyson has done a lot of defending and publicly speaking about hip hop, and he's been able to manage a sophisticated career, so it's possible. But institutionally speaking, it's a marginally studied, examined form, and that has a lot of impact on where the power lies. The more your market pressure is, and when you have no legitimation in the intellectual arena, the corporate context has much more power. So it's actually part of the larger problem.
Cornell West is an old friend of over 30 years. He's my man. Loved Cornell, knew him when he was an undergraduate, living in, might have been Leverett House, right, 1,000 years ago. Love him to death. Now, the Summers issue and Cornell and the rap thing, I think that everybody should play to their strengths. If you're an academic and you're an academic intellectual, you should stay in your lane and play your position, right? Now just hear me out. Son, I heard your question, so just hear me out. And I love my man to death, right? But dude, play to your strengths. Stay in your position. Stay in your lane, man. If you was an articulate professor and you can talk about Coltrane and Chekhov, do that. You understand? If you can give excellent lectures on Emerson, stay with Emerson, man. But don't jump out your lane, right? Because when I'm 50-some years old trying to look like a rapper, man, I'm out my lane. You know what I'm saying? I should stay in my lane like young people do their rap thing. Now, because I'm not in the university, I'm free to say what I want to say, right? Because I ain't got to worry about nobody blocking me trying to get a position at a prestigious Ivy League university and my name come across some dude's desk, and so I told them that their rap video was terrible. See, the thing was terrible, man. That didn't sound good. So what I want my man to do is be the brilliant intellectual that he is and give peace a chance and stay with Emerson, Chekhov, and John Coltrane. Let everybody say amen. Say amen, y'all.
Amen. Amen. All right, well, I just want to give the panelists a chance to make closing remarks, sort of sum up some of their thoughts on the evening. And so I'll let Professor Rose start.
I guess what I'd really hope everyone goes away with is the interest in being as sort of engaged and critically reflective as they can about the politics of their own consumption. And how that consumption ties into an enormous global network of images, ideas, and social politics. And I guess one of my big concern is that, the public conversation has to be developed in such a way that critique doesn't become just you're an outsider or you don't know or this is, my position has to be right because I'm in whatever position that is. Because I certainly don't think that academics should have some special role in determining what happens in hip hop. But it would be irresponsible of me for someone who's written on hip hop for 20 years, who's from the Bronx, who's watched it develop, who's participated in it on the margins for a very long time, to not be honest about what I think it has evolved into in the commercial realm, the degree to which it has valorized the kind of really problematic black masculinity, problematic representations of women. It has more homophobia than other youth commercially viable youth forms. It has taken up enormous space commercially without much internal critique that I think it needs. Does that mean I don't think it's extraordinary, that its creative, regenerative possibilities are immense? No, I do, and that's why I'm invested in bothering to talk about it. This isn't about critiquing a whole generation. There are many people in hip-hop who are upset with hip-hop, too. And that's what I'm trying to help enable. Not that I'm that, because I'm a little too old for that, but I'm not too old to say that I am invested in a way that I think we all need to be invested. Anything a whole generation of black people say they're invested in, we need to invigorate that public conversation. Stop treating it as like you either Bill O'Reilly or you're on the opposite end, and that kind of polarized conversation doesn't help us. The only thing that's going to help us is serious, self-reflective, critical standards, and if what you're consuming doesn't reflect your values in the world, then you need to challenge that, whether it's hip-hop or anything else.
My point is very simple. I've been enormously enriched by this conversation. I want to thank Professor Rose and Mr. Dash, because I think it's this kind of honest, candid conversation that has to take place in the black community. We'll not always agree, but since we're adults, we don't need to. So I'm just very thankful, and I want to thank everybody here for hosting this, because I think this should be the beginning of a series of critical, as they say in the industry, critical interrogations, right? As we deconstruct, right, exactly, right.
That's true, that's true.
So I'm just very thankful. Mr. Dash.
Thank you. In my transition out of hip hop, what I'm learning today is that the younger black man and woman are a lot more evolved than people want to give us credit for. We will no longer accept urban clothing because it's not made well. We will no longer accept stupid lyrics because it's not a proper representation of us. I do think we're evolving, but I don't think other people are recognizing that. So this argument about hip hop, about the undermining of women, that was a great argument to me 3 or 4 years ago. But I think it's been acknowledged and it's been adjusted. And the reason why I say that is they're still there, and there's still those guys that say these things and do sort of try to capitalize off exploitive things, but they're not getting the light that they used to.
That's true.
They're not getting recognized. They're not selling the records. They're not getting the endorsements. But yet people still talk about it as much as if nothing's changed. What I'm seeing is a culture that is leaning toward being smarter, that's leaning toward quality and being responsible. That's what I'm seeing. And I just wish that when the other generations or the older generations speak on us, that they just be proud of us in public. Because if we're not proud of us, how can we expect them to be proud of us? I don't understand that. And I never have. I never have. Especially in a public way. So me coming from a place where someone may perceive it as negative and being someone that has exploited negative perceptions, I'm doing everything I can to change it. And I'm doing everything I can to present opportunity for people that want to live that way. And I think everyone from hip-hop that's still here from those old days does exactly the same. And sometimes we need a little bit of positive reinforcement. I need attention. Our culture needs some positive attention, not negative. So the reason why we get that way when you get in public and start saying bad things, it's like, goddamn, I just spent 10 years trying to change it. Give me some props. And I appreciate y'all letting me speak, and I appreciate me being able to say that I spoke at Harvard, because it's a pretty smart thing to say.
All right, dude. Well, I think as LL Cool J said, and as Mr. Dash brought up, we all need love. Thank you for coming out and showing love. Thanks to the panelists for coming again and sharing with us their wisdom. And thank you for the audience. And thank you to the IOP for not putting me in the middle of these people.